Ashar was a dead world. The once great planet, home to a thriving and advanced civilization, now lay in ruin, a desolate wasteland covered in endless plains of ash and charred remains. The sky, perpetually shrouded in a dull gray haze, cast an eerie, oppressive gloom over the landscape. Towering cities had been reduced to skeletal structures of blackened metal and stone, their original designs indistinguishable beneath centuries of neglect and decay. The ground itself seemed to bear the scars of a catastrophic event, cracks running deep like the planet's own broken soul. Yet, in the heart of this devastation, humanity found purpose. The Guardians of Ash, an elite group of soldiers, historians, and engineers, were tasked with the sacred duty of preserving what was left of Ashar's secrets. They operated from a high-tech base on the planet's only remaining verdant region, a place that had once been a lush forest, now a shadow of its former self, but still holding an aura of forgotten grandeur. The Guardians' mission was not only one of preservation but protection, against the dangers lurking both within and beyond the ashes. Commander Elara Trent stood at the edge of a cliff overlooking the desolation below, her gaze focused on the ruins that sprawled like a ghostly memory beneath the gray skies. The wind howled through the wreckage, a sound like the planet's mournful cry, carrying with it the faintest traces of the strange readings she had been tracking. Something had stirred beneath Ashar's surface, something far more than mere remnants of the ancient civilization that once thrived here. Elara had felt it for weeks, like a pulse that reverberated through the very air. The usual hum of Ashar's forgotten machinery had come to life, and it was growing stronger with each passing day. Her voice cut through the silence of the command center, calling out to her team, "Gather everyone. We need to prepare for a full sweep of the area. Whatever is down there, it's not just an artifact." Lieutenant Cale Rogan, a loyal member of her crew, turned from the large, flickering monitor in the center of the command room. His expression was serious, more so than usual. "Commander, the readings are off the charts. It's not just any buried tech, it's something active." Elara's mind raced. The Guardians were trained to deal with relics of the past, but this was different. For centuries, Ashar had been nothing more than a memory, its technological wonders nothing but tales passed down through generations. They had believed everything of importance had been looted, studied, or destroyed long ago. Yet here was proof that something far more ancient and far more dangerous lay hidden beneath the surface. "Prepare the excavation teams," Elara ordered, "and keep this quiet. No one outside the base gets word of this. We can't afford any attention." A cold shiver ran down her spine, but she masked it with determination. The Guardians had faced challenges before, but this was different. Something was awakening on Ashar, and the universe would come to know the consequences if humanity failed to protect it. As Elara and her team descended into the dark corridors of Ashar's crumbling remnants, they had no way of knowing that the storm they were about to unleash would change the course of history forever. The ashes of Ashar were not just a relic of the past. They were a warning. The excavation team worked tirelessly for days, digging deeper into the ruined depths of Ashar's forgotten vaults. The technology beneath the surface was unlike anything humanity had encountered. Despite centuries of ruin, intricate systems still pulsed with life, faint lights flickering in forgotten corridors like dying stars. Elara, along with her closest advisors, watched in awe and trepidation as they uncovered an ancient structure, a vast network of underground chambers buried beneath the planet's surface. Inside the main chamber, a series of colossal machines hummed with dormant energy, their purposes unclear but undeniably powerful. At the center of it all was a massive, obelisk-like structure, pulsating with strange, unexplainable power. It stood like a monument to an age-long past, its surface covered in glowing symbols that seemed to shift and writhe as if alive. Elara approached cautiously, the weight of its presence pressing down on her chest like an invisible hand. "Commander, this is it," said Kale, his voice filled with awe. "This is what we've been searching for." Before Alara could respond, a low rumble reverberated through the ground, vibrating up through her boots. The air seemed to thicken, as if something far older than human history was awakening. A screeching noise pierced the silence, the sound of metal grinding against itself. Impossibly, the obelisk began to shift. Ilara's heart raced. She had expected relics, perhaps even dormant weapons, but this was something else entirely. Suddenly, a sharp signal blared from the communications console. It was a warning, but not from any human source. The transmission was coded, encrypted in a manner far beyond anything they had encountered. The Guardians' tech experts scrambled to decode it, but the meaning was clear: they were not alone. From the far reaches of the galaxy, a fleet emerged, massive, dark vessels that seemed to hang in the void like ominous specters. Their design was sleek, aggressive, their sheer size overwhelming. The ships bore the insignia of the Veranos Empire, a race of conquerors known throughout the galaxy for their ruthlessness and unyielding desire to control all. Ilara's stomach twisted as she saw the enemy fleet on her screen. They had known that Ashar was valuable, but the speed with which they had arrived made it clear they had been watching. The Veranos had been waiting, and now they had come for what lay beneath Ashar's surface. "Commander, the Veranos have entered the system," Kale said, his voice tight. "They're moving fast. We need to prepare for battle." Ilara's eyes darted over the holographic display of the planet's orbit, calculating their chances. With their limited fleet and Ashar's defenses in ruins, the Guardians were outmatched. Yet, surrender was not an option. Not now. "We don't know what they're after, but we can't let them take it," Alara said, her voice firm, cutting through the rising panic in the room. "Prepare the fleet. We fight to protect Ashar." As she looked at her team, their faces set with determination, Alara's mind raced. The Veranos were not just a military threat. They were an empire built on the pursuit of power, driven by the belief that Ashar held the key to domination. She had to protect the ancient secrets below, but more than that, she had to ensure humanity didn't fall into the same trap of greed that had destroyed Ashar's original inhabitants. With the first Verano ships entering the atmosphere, Alara realized that the battle for Ashar would not just be a fight for survival. It would be a battle for the soul of the galaxy itself, and she was ready to make sure that humanity's legacy would not end in flames. As the hum of enemy engines grew louder, the Guardians of Ash stood ready, their resolve hardening with each passing second. The true fight had just begun. The Veranos fleet loomed closer, its warships descending into Eshar's orbit with cold precision. Alara stood on the command deck, staring out at the dark shapes of enemy ships as they positioned themselves above the planet. She could feel the weight of their presence pressing down on her like a storm, but there was no time for hesitation. The Guardians' mission had changed. What had started as an archaeological preservation effort was now a race to prevent Ashar's forgotten power from falling into the wrong hands. "Commander, we've breached the first security chamber," Kale's voice crackled over the intercom. "We're close to something that doesn't match anything we've seen in the vaults above. This isn't just tech, it's something else." Ilara's heart quickened. The closer they got to the central core, the more she felt the overwhelming pulse of energy radiating from the depths of the planet. The dormant power beneath Ashar had begun to awaken in response to the Veranos' arrival, and with it came an unsettling sense of urgency. The team moved deeper, their footsteps echoing in the dark, echoing off the curved, metallic walls of the ancient vault. Their path led them through long-forgotten corridors where the air seemed thick with centuries of silence. Strange symbols lined the walls, glowing faintly, shifting in patterns that no human eye could fully comprehend. Whatever had been left behind on Ashar, it was not merely advanced technology, it was something living, something aware. "Do you feel that?" Lieutenant Maya Kessler, the team's chief engineer asked, her voice hushed as she adjusted the sensors on her wrist. There's a hum, deep within the walls, like it's calling to us. Ilara nodded grimly. I feel it too. Stay alert. At the far end of the corridor, the group arrived at a massive set of double doors, far larger than anything they'd encountered so far. The surface was smooth, almost organic, like the gates to some ancient, forgotten temple. Etched into the door were intricate patterns that shimmered with an eerie light, moving as though alive. As Ilara stepped forward to examine the symbols, she felt a surge of energy ripple through the air, a pulse of something ancient and terrifying. It was the same feeling she'd had when they first began uncovering the ruins. Only now it was far more intense. Commander, look, Kale called out from the side. He pointed to a panel next to the doors. This is an access code, but it's not like any we've seen before. It's biological. We'll need a living host to unlock it. Ilara hesitated. The idea of interfacing with something this ancient, this alien, was unsettling, but there was no other choice. The Verenos were already closing in, and they wouldn't wait. Kale, Maya, Ilara said, prepare the team. We need to access this vault, no matter the cost. Maya stepped forward, her fingers trembling slightly as she reached for the panel. The moment her hand touched it, the ground beneath them trembled, and a low, resonating hum filled the air. The doors began to part slowly, revealing the inner sanctum. What they saw inside was beyond anything they could have imagined. The central chamber housed a massive structure that seemed both technological and organic. Towering pillars of dark metal rose toward a ceiling that appeared to be alive, pulsing with a dark energy. At the center stood the heart of Asher's secret, a crystalline entity suspended in midair, encased in a shimmering force field. The moment the vault doors fully opened, a deep voice, booming and incomprehensible, filled their minds. It wasn't spoken. It wasn't even heard. It was felt. The voice carried a weight, a power that seemed to bypass their thoughts entirely, speaking directly to their souls. The Asher conduit has been found. The chosen are here. Ilara's breath caught in her throat as she stared at the crystalline entity, a chill running down her spine. She had no idea what it was, but one thing was certain. The power within this chamber was like nothing humanity had ever seen. And if the Verenos had been searching for this, it wasn't just Ashar's history they wanted, it was this. With a sudden jolt, the crystal began to pulse. The countdown had begun. The pulse from the crystal intensified, sending shockwaves through the chamber. The very air crackled with raw energy, and Ilara felt her skin tingle as if every cell in her body was being charged by an unseen force. The Ashar conduit, whatever it was, had fully awakened, and it was no longer just a relic of the past. The hum of its power reverberated through the vault, vibrating the walls and the floor beneath their feet. Kale's voice broke through the rising tension. Commander, we need to move now. The Verenovs are closing in. We can't afford to wait. But Ilara didn't move. Her eyes were fixed on the glowing entity in the center of the chamber, the crystal that seemed to defy logic, both technological and organic in its form. It was more than a weapon. It was a living thing, a piece of a forgotten civilization's soul, perhaps, and it had been waiting for them. We need to secure this, Ilara said, her voice steady despite the maelstrom of thoughts swirling in her mind. If the Verenos get their hands on this, we won't just be fighting for Ashar. We'll be fighting for the entire galaxy. But just as the team was about to approach the crystal, a loud crackling noise split the air. Ilara spun, her instincts on high alert, only to see Captain Lyle Harrington step forward, a strange, almost manic expression on his face. Lyle? Ilara's voice was sharp with confusion. What are you doing? The captain's gaze flickered to her, his eyes dark and full of something Ilara hadn't seen before, something cold. It's already too late, Commander. We've been blind all along. What are you talking about? Maya asked, her voice edged with disbelief. Lyle's lips curled into a thin smile. You think humanity can control this power? You think you can protect it? The Veranos are smarter than you think. This isn't just a relic, it's a weapon, one that can reshape the entire galaxy. And you've been keeping it from us. Alara felt a chill. What are you saying, Lyle? I'm saying, Lyle continued, his voice low, that we're not the ones meant to control it. The Veranos have known this for centuries. They've been watching us, yes, but they've also known that humanity is incapable of wielding this power responsibly. I've been in contact with them, and I've made my choice. Before Alara could react, Lyle raised his hand, and the unmistakable hum of weapons charging filled the chamber. Her heart skipped a beat as her gaze shot to the others. The Guardians' weapons, nearly all of them, had been disarmed earlier during their excavation. Yet Lyle was armed, his blaster drawn, the sleek black barrel trained directly on Alara. You've made a mistake, Lyle, Alara said, her voice strained but firm. This isn't you. You're letting them manipulate you. Lyle shook his head, his eyes flickering with cold conviction. No, Commander, I'm choosing the future of the galaxy. The Veranos will take what's theirs, and humanity will rise, not through weakness, but through strength. The others in the team were frozen, unsure of how to react. Some, like Kale, were still in disbelief, while others, those closest to Lyle, looked on with hesitant eyes, unsure whether they should trust him or take action. Lyle, don't do this, Maya said softly, her hand hovering near her sidearm. The Guardians aren't just about protecting the past. They're about ensuring we don't repeat it. This power, it can't be controlled. You'll destroy everything. For a moment, Lyle seemed to hesitate. His eyes flickered with doubt, but it was gone in an instant. He had made his decision. I'm sorry, Maya, Lyle said coldly, his finger tightening on the trigger. Before anyone could move, Alara acted. In a flash, she dove forward, knocking Maya aside as Lyle fired. The shot missed its mark, the bolt of energy searing past her shoulder and embedding itself into the vault's wall. Chaos erupted in the chamber as the team scrambled for cover. The Veranos would be here soon, and now they were facing not only an external threat but a betrayal from within. Alara, Kale shouted, ducking behind a pillar. What do we do now? Alara's mind raced as she assessed the situation. Lyle's actions had turned the mission upside down, but she couldn't let him derail everything. The conduit, this sentient power, was still there, still pulsing with dangerous energy. She couldn't let it fall into the wrong hands, even if it meant fighting against one of her own. We fight, Alara said, her voice steady despite the turmoil. And we win. We protect Ashar, no matter the cost. The sound of enemy ships breaking through the atmosphere reverberated through the vault as the Veranos descended. The final battle for Ashar had begun, and now humanity's darkest choices would come to light. The situation had escalated in a way Alara could never have predicted. Not only was the Veranos fleet closing in on Ashar, but they were now facing a traitor within their own ranks. Lyle Harrington, once a trusted captain, had defected to the enemy. His actions had created chaos, and now Alara had no choice but to focus on two deadly fronts. The Veranos, who were descending upon the planet with an unstoppable force, and Lyle, who had weaponized the very power they had uncovered. In the vault, the crystal, the Ashar conduit, continued to pulse ominously. Its energy surged, resonating through the walls, and Alara felt the pull of it, as though the very fabric of reality was twisting around it. The power was irresistible, but it wasn't the kind of strength humanity could harness, not without paying a terrible price. Commander, we're out of time, Kale's voice crackled over the comms, pulling her back to the present. The Veranos are entering the atmosphere, and we've lost contact with half of the outlying bases. They're already sending ground troops to secure the perimeter. We're going to be overrun. Alara clenched her jaw. The Guardians were outnumbered, outgunned, and now, with Lyle's betrayal, they had no guarantee that the rest of their own people could be trusted. The truth was, Ashar was more than a historical relic. It was a warship, a weapon that could tip the balance of power across the galaxy. The Veranos weren't just after ancient artifacts. They were after the weapon hidden deep within the planet's core, and now they had the inside track to claiming it. Alara turned to her team, her voice steady but full of resolve. "We'll defend the vault. We cannot let the Veranos gain access to the conduit. Kale, Maya, you're with me. The rest of you, get to the surface. We need to slow the Veranos down before they can launch a full assault." Maya and Kale nodded in agreement, their faces grim but determined. As they moved toward the chamber's exit, Alara paused for a moment to glance back at the conduit, its soft glow reflecting in her eyes. It seemed to be beckoning, whispering something just out of reach, something far older and far more powerful than anything humanity had ever dreamed. The Veranos were not just after power. They were after a key to domination, a key that Ashar's original creators had left behind. But humanity couldn't let that happen, not while Alara had breath in her lungs. The ground shook violently as enemy forces landed, their dark ships touching down like harbingers of doom. The Guardian base on Ashar was soon flooded with Veranos soldiers, heavily armed and seemingly endless. Their numbers were overwhelming, but Alara had something they didn't: the knowledge of Ashar's terrain and defenses. "Prepare to fight," Alara said, a finality in her voice. "We hold the line here, or we die trying." Above, the Veranos fleet unleashed waves of fire, bombarding the surface in an attempt to break through the Guardian defenses. A rain of molten rock and metal tore through the sky, making it difficult to breathe, to think, to move. But the Guardians had prepared for this day. As the Veranos soldiers made their way through the ash and rubble, the Guardians struck back. Laser fire and explosions lit the sky as both sides clashed. The air was thick with smoke and the sound of weapons discharging. Alara fought through the chaos, her mind focused on one thing: the conduit. The weapon had to be secured before the Veranos could get their hands on it. But as the battle raged, another unexpected twist came into play. The energy from the conduit intensified, and Alara felt it in the very marrow of her bones. It was reacting to the violence, to the desperation. She had been warned that the conduit wasn't a simple tool. It was a living force, connected to the planet itself. And now it was awakening in response to the conflict. Alara's comms buzzed with urgency. "Commander, the conduit, it's generating a field. We can't get near it. Whatever's happening, it's changing everything." Alara's pulse quickened as she watched the energy field surrounding the crystal ripple and expand. The conduit was no longer a passive object. It was beginning to affect its surroundings, distorting reality itself. Ashar was no longer just a battleground. It was becoming a weapon, one that could level entire fleets. "We need to stop it now," Alara shouted, but it was too late. Suddenly, the ground beneath them cracked open, and the conduit's energy burst outward, sending a wave of force that knocked the Guardians and Veranos alike off their feet. The sky above darkened as the atmosphere seemed to tear apart at the seams, and Alara realized with a growing dread that the battle for Ashar was no longer just a fight for control. It was a fight to prevent total annihilation. In the distance, the Veranos ships began to falter, their weapon systems malfunctioning under the field's growing intensity. They had underestimated Ashar's true power, and now they would pay the price. But Alara knew that the real challenge was only just beginning. The conduit wasn't done yet, and neither was humanity's fight. The battlefield had descended into chaos. The conduit's surge of energy had caused a ripple effect across Ashar, disrupting both the physical and technological landscape. Veranos' warships faltered, their communication systems glitching and their weaponry malfunctioning. The Guardians' forces, equally disoriented, found themselves struggling to adapt to the sudden shift in the environment. The ground itself trembled, as if the planet itself was waking up in response to the conduit's power. Alara scrambled to regain control of the situation, her mind racing. The Veranos were regrouping, trying to adapt to the field's interference, but the energy surrounding the conduit was growing stronger by the second. It wasn't just affecting the weapon systems, it was distorting reality. The once familiar landscape around them was warping, shapes blurring and shifting unnaturally. In the distance, the jagged peaks of Ashar's mountains twisted into impossible angles, and the sky above darkened, swirling with static as if torn between dimensions. "We need to move," Kale shouted, grabbing Alara's arm. "If we stay here much longer, we'll be caught in the field center. The conduit's effect is spreading." Alara nodded, the weight of the situation pressing down on her. They couldn't stay. The conduit's energy was growing out of control, and if they didn't act soon, it would destroy everything, not just Ashar, but the entire system. She had no doubt the Veranos knew what they were dealing with now, and they would stop at nothing to secure the conduit. "Alara," Maya's voice cut through the noise of the battlefield. She was crouched near a shattered console, trying to regain communications. "I've located the central core. There's a way to shut down the conduit's power, but we'll need to get close to it, really close. It's buried deep in the vault." Alara looked up, her breath catching. The thought of getting any closer to the conduit seemed suicidal, but if Maya was right, it was their only chance. "Kale, Maya, you're with me. The rest of you, hold the line. Do whatever you can to delay the Veranos." Her voice was firm, a leader's resolve, but even she knew the odds were slim. The Veranos were already regrouping and would be relentless in their pursuit. The team moved quickly, pushing through the disorienting chaos that had overtaken the battlefield. The landscape itself seemed to fight them as the energy field intensified, twisting the terrain beneath their feet. Ashar, it seemed, was not just a planet, it was alive, responding to the conduit's awakening in ways they hadn't anticipated. As they approached the vault's entrance, Alara felt the pressure in the air increase. It wasn't just the energy that was being released from the conduit. It was as if the very fabric of reality was starting to tear, a rupture in the cosmic order. The walls of the vault, once solid and unyielding, now shimmered and flickered like a mirage. "This is it," Maya said, her voice tight with fear. "The closer we get, the more unstable the field becomes. We won't have much time once we reach the core." Alara nodded. "We go in, deactivate the core, and get out, no matter what." With a deep breath, the three of them entered the vault. The energy inside was unbearable. Every step they took felt like they were moving through a thick, oppressive fog. The conduit loomed before them, its crystalline form pulsing with a malevolent energy. It was more than just a weapon now. It was a force of nature, alive and aware, feeding off the chaos around it. Maya quickly moved to the central console, her hands flying over the controls in an attempt to access the shutdown protocols. But as she worked, the walls around them began to shake violently, and the conduit's energy surged, pushing them back. "Get down," Kale shouted, pulling Alara and Maya to the floor as the ground beneath them cracked open. The entire vault trembled as the conduit's energy reached a boiling point. "I can't do it," Maya cried, her fingers slipping across the interface. "The power's too much. I need a direct link to the core." Alara knew what had to be done. She could feel the conduit's pull, a magnetic force that seemed to reach into her very soul, tempting her to give in, to surrender to its power. But she couldn't, not yet. "Take the risk, Maya," Alara shouted, her voice rising above the chaos. "You're our only chance." Maya hesitated for a moment, then nodded grimly. She activated a sequence, and the vault shuddered as a series of vents opened, pulling the surrounding energy toward the conduit. But something else happened. The conduit's pulse intensified, and the ground split open with a deafening roar. The energy field around them twisted, and Ilara realized with a sudden jolt that they weren't just fighting for control, they were fighting for survival. The fabric of reality itself seemed to be tearing apart, and the conduit was at the heart of it. Time was running out. Ilara knew that whatever happened next, they had to stop the conduit from unleashing its full power before Ashar and everything in its wake was consumed by the storm it had started. The world around them collapsed into a blur of flickering shadows and violent pulses of energy. The conduit's power surged, and Ilara could feel the very core of Ashar trembling beneath her feet. Time seemed to bend and twist with every heartbeat, reality itself warping and stretching. The energy from the conduit was tearing at the fabric of the planet, threatening to unravel everything. Maya's fingers flew over the console as the force field around the conduit intensified. Each second felt like an eternity, and Ilara could feel the heat of the energy seeping into her bones, overwhelming her senses. The walls of the vault groaned, shaking with the pressure, and the entire structure seemed to pulse with the rhythm of the conduit. "I'm almost there," Maya shouted, her voice strained. Her forehead glistened with sweat, her breath coming in sharp gasps. "I just need a few more seconds. I can't. The ground beneath them cracked open again, sending a shockwave that sent the three of them sprawling. Ilara slammed against the vault's cold floor, pain shooting through her side. Kale was already on his feet, pulling her up. "Stay with it, Maya," Kale urged. "You can do this." Maya nodded, her eyes focused on the flickering holographic screen in front of her, but the pressure was growing. It was becoming harder to concentrate. Every ounce of energy the conduit expelled was pushing them further from their goal, pulling them deeper into the abyss of chaos. The vault was no longer a safe haven. It had become part of the storm. "Come on, Maya. We don't have time." Ilara barked, her voice cutting through the cacophony. Maya's fingers hovered over the controls one last time before slamming down on a sequence. The vault's walls trembled as the energy from the conduit flared one final time, casting blinding light throughout the room. Ilara shielded her eyes, trying to focus on Maya's movements. Then, a sharp electric sound filled the air. The conduit flickered. The energy surrounding it began to dissipate in waves, like a breath slowly being released. The pulse of power that had filled the vault subsided, replaced by an eerie stillness. The distortion in the air settled, and the chaotic atmosphere that had gripped Ashar seemed to ease. Maya staggered back, exhausted. "It's done," she said, her voice hoarse. "I shut it down." Ilara exhaled a shaky breath, but she didn't let herself relax, not yet. They were still deep within enemy territory, and the Veranos were closing in fast. The Veranos ships in orbit had already begun to descend toward the surface, their landing parties pushing forward to capture the vault. The conduit's sudden deactivation had given them a brief reprieve, but it wouldn't last long. "We need to get out of here now," Ilara said, her voice low and commanding. She turned to Maya and Kale, her gaze hardening. "The Veranos will be here any minute. We've bought ourselves time, but we're not safe yet." Kale checked his weapon and nodded grimly. "Agreed, we need to move fast. The others are waiting for us outside." Ilara glanced back at the conduit, its once violent energy now dormant. The crystal's glow had dimmed, its power sealed, at least for now. But even as she turned away, she couldn't shake the feeling that the conduit wasn't truly gone. It had only been suppressed, contained by whatever force Maya had triggered. Ashar was far more than a weapon. It was a living entity, and its heart was still beating beneath the surface. "Let's move," Ilara ordered, and the team pushed forward, exiting the vault with the sound of heavy footsteps echoing in the hollow corridors. The battlefield outside had changed. The once fiery skies above Ashar now lay still, a strange calm before the storm. But as they emerged from the shadows of the vault, Ilara's eyes scanned the horizon, and her blood ran cold. The Veranos had arrived. Their ships were already descending in a perfect, calculated formation. The ground below was alive with their forces, a sea of soldiers moving with swift precision, advancing towards the vault's entrance. The Guardians had little time to prepare, but Ilara's instincts kicked in. They had to buy as much time as they could. "We fight," she said, her voice unwavering. "We hold them off." The conduit had been silenced, but the war was far from over. The true battle for Ashar, humanity's future, was about to begin. The Varanos descended like a storm, their black armored soldiers flooding the battlefield with ruthless precision. Ashar's surface, once a serene and forgotten place, had become a chaotic battleground. The Guardians' forces had been scattered, and now, with the Varanos pushing forward, Ilara knew they had only one option left: to fight for every inch of ground and make sure Ashar's secrets never fell into enemy hands. Ilara glanced at Maya and Kale, both of them ready, weapons in hand. They were exhausted, bloodied from their fight to reach the vault, but there was no time to rest. They had deactivated the conduit, yes, but the battle had only just begun. And if the Varanos breached their position now, humanity's chance at survival would be lost. "We're holding this ground," Ilara said firmly, the weight of responsibility settling heavy on her shoulders. "No matter what happens, we can't let them reach the conduit." Kale nodded, setting his jaw. "We'll make our stand here." The ground around them rumbled as the Varano soldiers advanced, their weapons primed. Ilara's mind raced. She knew their position was compromised, that the conduit's suppression wouldn't last forever. The energy from it was still lingering in the atmosphere, like a smoldering ember, waiting to reignite. If the Varanos took control of it, the consequences would be devastating, not just for Ashar, but for the galaxy itself. Suddenly, the sky overhead flickered with the hum of Varano's airships, their massive shadow casting dark spots on the battlefield. Ilara's heart beat faster as she saw them drop troops, hundreds of them, each suited in the dark, imposing armor that made them look more like an endless wave of machines than living soldiers. The first of them hit the ground and advanced toward the vault's entrance, firing with brutal efficiency. Now, Ilara barked. The Guardians opened fire, sending blasts of energy toward the advancing Varanos forces. The air was filled with the crack of weapons discharging, the explosions rattling the earth beneath their feet. But the Varanos didn't slow. They kept pushing forward with relentless determination, their advanced armor absorbing most of the energy, and their superior numbers gave them an edge the Guardians couldn't afford to ignore. "Ilara, we need reinforcements," Kale shouted as he fired into the advancing line. "We can't hold them off much longer." "I know," Ilara muttered, gritting her teeth. The odds were insurmountable. They had to buy time, even if it meant sacrificing everything. In a desperate move, Ilara activated the last of Ashar's defense systems. The dormant energy channels beneath the surface hummed to life, the ground shaking as massive turrets rose from the earth, aiming their barrels toward the Varanos. A powerful volley of fire rained down, forcing the Varano soldiers to scatter and seek cover. It wasn't enough to stop them, but it slowed them down, just enough to give the Guardians a fleeting chance. But even as the turrets fired, Ilara knew it wouldn't be long before the Varanos adapted. They always did. Their battle strategy was flawless, their ability to recover from setbacks legendary. And now, with Lyle and the traitors working against them, Ilara's team was fighting with one hand tied behind their backs. Then, something unexpected happened. A low rumble echoed across the battlefield, followed by an intense vibration. Ilara's pulse quickened as she realized what was happening. The conduit, though suppressed, was awakening again. The energy from it flared like a firestorm, lighting up the darkened sky. The battlefield seemed to tremble under the sheer force of the power, and the Varano soldiers, as well as the Guardians, were thrown off balance by the shockwave. "What the hell?" Maya shouted, looking around in confusion. "It's coming back online." The Varanos, too, were caught off guard. some of their forces staggering as the very earth seemed to come alive beneath their feet. The conduit, despite their best efforts, had not been fully contained. It was feeding off the chaos, strengthening itself with every moment of conflict. Then Alara understood. The conduit wasn't just a weapon, it was a sentient force attuned to the violence, the energy, the desperation of battle. It fed on conflict and chaos, and now it was waking once again, but this time it was not controlled by the Varanos or humanity. It was reacting to the war, to the bloodshed, as if choosing its own side in this conflict. "This is it," Alara said, her voice a mixture of awe and dread. "The conduit is deciding the outcome of this war. We need to get to it, or it will destroy us all." She turned to Kale and Maya, her mind set on a singular, dangerous course of action. "We have to get inside the vault. If we don't stop it now, the conduit will turn everything against us." Together, the three of them sprinted toward the vault, weaving through the chaotic battlefield, dodging fire and explosions. The conduit's energy was now overwhelming, its pulse quickening in a rhythmic, hypnotic beat that seemed to resonate with Alara's heart. As they reached the vault, the ground cracked beneath them, and the conduit erupted in a final, blinding flash of light. The last battle for Ashar had begun, and with it, the fate of humanity would be sealed. Alara didn't know if they would make it out alive, but she knew one thing: they had given everything to protect what they loved. Now, it was up to the conduit to decide the galaxy's future.